Imagine a historical mystery so absolutely profound that it takes nearly a century and a massive leap in modern science to even partially unravel. Today, we're looking at one of the most baffling cases of mistaken identity in American history. We are breaking down the story of a missing 4-year-old boy, a highly dramatic rescue, and a family legacy that was literally completely upended decades later.
92. Think about that number for a second. For 92 years, an absolute, total lie was accepted as historical fact. Entire generations lived and died believing a very specific narrative, completely unaware that the very foundation of their family tree was built on a tragic mistake.
So you really have to wonder, what actually happens when a century-old family truth turns out to be a lie? Imagine having your entire family identity, all those stories you were told at every single holiday gathering, just completely shattered by a single scientific test. How does something like that even happen, and what are the cascading consequences?
Section 1. The Vanishing at Swayze Lake. Okay, let's dive into this by going back to where the mystery begins. We're traveling all the way back to August of 1912, down to the murky, rural swamplands of Louisiana.
Now, the sequence of events here was incredibly chaotic and fast-paced. In August 1912, a 4-year-old boy named Bobby Dunbar vanishes during a family fishing trip near Swayze Lake. His family searches the swamps for hours, which turns into days, but nothing. It becomes this massive regional news story. But then, fast forward 8 months later to April 1913, and a boy matching Bobby's general description is found roughly 1,000 miles away in Mississippi. This sudden discovery leads straight into a highly publicized kidnapping trial in 1914, but as you'll see, this wasn't just some simple rescue story.
Section 2. 2 mothers, 1 boy. The discovery of this child sparked one of the most unusual and intense custody disputes in early 20th century American legal history. Because when the dust finally settled, there wasn't just one mother claiming the child. There were 2. On one side, you've got Bobby's mother, Leslie Dunbar. She travels from Louisiana to see the boy and definitively identifies him as her missing son. But on the other side, you have a woman named Julia Anderson. She arrives separately and insists, no, the child is actually her son, a boy named Bruce Anderson. And the guy who actually had custody of the boy when he was found, that was a traveling handyman named William Cantwell Walters. He insisted he was totally innocent and fully backed Julia Anderson's claim, saying the boy was indeed Bruce and that Julia had willingly given the boy into his care. What's really fascinating here is the extreme limitations of the legal system back in the 1910s. I mean, how do you solve a dispute like this in 1913? You can't just swab a cheek, there's zero DNA testing available. Investigators and reporters had to rely entirely on visual comparisons. They literally stood in court arguing over scars, birthmarks, and completely subjective physical features. Both families are citing these vague visual cues as absolute proof, which obviously made finding the actual truth incredibly muddy.
Section 3. A Century of Certainty. Despite all that contested, highly subjective evidence, the legal system eventually had to make a decision.
The court ultimately sided with the Dunbar family, heavily relying on Leslie Dunbar's identification of the boy. So, William Cantwell Walters is arrested, tried in 1914, convicted of kidnapping, and sentenced to hard labor. Now, although his conviction was later overturned on appeal on some separate legal grounds, his life was completely ruined. And Julia Anderson? Her desperate claim to her own son was completely ignored and never legally recognized. And this decision legally finalized the boy's path for good. He was taken in and raised by the Dunbar family as Bobby Dunbar. He grew up, he married, he had children of his own, and he spent his entire adult life sharing the crazy story of his dramatic childhood rescue at family gatherings. For the rest of the 20th century, this matter was considered legally and socially settled. The boy himself apparently never even doubted his own identity. As far as the world was concerned, it was a closed case.
Section 4. The 2004 DNA revelation. But, closed cases don't always stay closed, especially when modern technology catches up to history. Fast forward way ahead to 2004, decades after the man everyone knew as Bobby Dunbar had passed away. His granddaughter, a genealogy researcher named Margaret Dunbar Cutright, started digging into some lingering, quiet doubts about the case. Working with a relative of the original Bobby Dunbar's still living brother, she facilitated a DNA test.
So the crucial point is, the results were completely unambiguous. The man who had lived his entire adult life as Bobby Dunbar was not biologically related to the Dunbar family at all.
I really want to let that sink in for a second. The boy brought back to Louisiana in 1913 was a complete biological stranger to the family that raised him. Section 5. Why the results matter. We are now pivoting to the absolute core focus of this explainer. Why do these DNA results actually matter so much? Because they didn't just correct a small historical footnote, they completely upended everything everyone thought they knew.
Let's walk through the staggering reality of what this DNA test actually proved. First, it means William Cantwell Walters, the handyman who was sentenced to hard labor, was very likely telling the truth from the very beginning. He was wrongly convicted of a kidnapping that literally never happened. Second, Julia Anderson, the mother the courts totally ignored. She was telling the truth all along. Her child was taken from her by a legal system that just lacked the tools to know the difference. Third, the boy was very likely Bruce Anderson. And finally, an entire family lived a complete myth for 92 years. The implications for justice here, even retrospectively, are absolutely staggering.
And this brilliantly illustrates the dual nature of scientific discovery. Science definitively solved part of the mystery, right? Because of the DNA results, we now know the boy's true identity was Bruce Anderson, and we know William Cantwell Walters was innocent. But what remains unsolved? Well, the DNA evidence confirmed who the surviving boy was not, but it tells us absolutely nothing about the fate of the real Bobby Dunbar. What actually happened at Swayze Lake in 1912? Investigators generally believe the original 4-year-old likely drowned in the swampland during that fishing trip, but we will never definitively know. Science gave us one incredible answer, but it permanently cemented a tragic void for another. Which leaves us with a really haunting psychological puzzle. How could a mother misidentify a child as her own son? It basically comes down to visual misidentification. Researchers point to a powerful, tragic cocktail of human emotion here. Leslie Dunbar was evaluating a child after 8 long months, a time when a 4-year-old naturally changes quite a bit anyway. Combine that with profound grief, the intense glare of public and media pressure, and an undeniable, genuine psychological need to believe your lost child has been found. It wasn't necessarily a malicious lie. It was a desperate mind seeing exactly what it needed to see.
Which brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with today. What do you think this case says about how easily even a mother's identification can be wrong under enough pressure? It is a chilling reminder of the fallibility of human memory and perception, especially when trauma is involved. Science finally brought Bruce Anderson his true name back, generations later. But it also proves that sometimes history is just a widely accepted mistake waiting for the right tool to uncover the truth. Keep questioning what you know, and we'll see you next time to unpack another fascinating mystery in our next explore.